the Father, and of the
Son,
Son, and of the
Holy
Holy
Spirit.
Spirit. Amen. Welcome back to Nets in the Water, stoking the flame of Catholic education. Excited to get into the broadest sense of what it means to be a Catholic educator in the modern world. And from a side of this that I'm very unfamiliar with, I'm already unfamiliar with Catholic education, but when we're really getting into the standards and all that sort of stuff, I got no game. So for context, tell the people a little bit about who you are, what do you do?
Sure.
Yeah, give us the elevator pitch here.
Again, Heather Womersley. I am the Dean of Curriculum and Instruction and Assistant to the Principal at St. Lawrence Catholic School here in Tampa, Florida. And my entire career has been involved in Catholic education in some way or another. A short time in an independent school in Polk County, Florida, but my job duties include helping support teachers and students and parents in anything that is not I just answer lots of random questions all day long, but also help guide curriculum. We order the textbooks. I work with teachers in curriculum meetings. And one of the fun tasks that I've been able to work on in the last 5 years in my position is working as an accreditation chairperson.
Okay.
So,
and that's what we're getting into today.
Exactly.
So I purposely come into these a little bit uninitiated. I purposely do very minimal research because I want to hear it straight from the source. I don't know much about what accreditation even means,
Right.
certain companies, anything like that. Before we dive too much into that, though, I am curious about your own journey, how you got into Catholic education. Everyone's journey has been so interesting and different. I'm just curious, how'd you get here?
Oh gosh, I grew up as a Catholic through up until about middle school, and then I did not go to my confirmation because I didn't feel like the kids that I went to school with, that went to church with me, I didn't like them. They weren't nice. They were unkind, and I couldn't reconcile that at the time. So fast forward, I ended up getting my degree in education and started selling insurance for a year before getting into education. But St. Mary's Catholic School was down the street from Nationwide Insurance, and I kept, that little tug, that little voice that says, you need to go and see about that. So I stopped in and shared my teaching portfolio, and the little sister came running back out, come back in, we'll talk to you. So that began my Catholic education teaching. Okay. And then when I ended up here in St. Petersburg, Transfiguration Catholic School was where I landed. And I decided, you know what, if I'm going to spend my life teaching in Catholic school, I'm going to go ahead and be official. And I did the RCIA program and was confirmed and, made it all the way it was supposed to be. So that journey is a little different. We have a lot of teachers in our Catholic schools that were students in our Catholic schools. They come back and teach at the same place. So my journey was just a little bit different in that regard, but it helped me to really learn a lot about the faith that I was teaching. So I wanted to set a good example for my students.
Yeah. So you came back, you were a teacher. How'd you get from teacher to now curriculum coordinator, director, assistant, question answerer, fire putter outer?
I love learning, and I just wanted to. I got my master's degree in reading from USF in St. Pete. Yay, go Bulls!
I just graduated USF.
Good for you.
Yeah.
And then I just kept thinking about getting that next level degree. So I got my worked on my doctorate. And that's through UWF, University of West Florida. And I did that in curriculum and instruction, thinking that would be a nice broad avenue. Because really, I wanted to be a curriculum coordinator. I wanted to support teachers. I see how hard my teacher friends work every single day. Yes. And I just wanted to be that person in the office that knows the walk that they travel every day and to be there to support them.
Yeah, with this, the more we've spoken to educators, whether at Studio 316, on this podcast, there's just so much going on.
So much going on.
So as a curriculum coordinator, how would that help minimize, I guess, the workload or like that sort of side of things? I see where it would help the students and like giving them good curriculum, but either way, the teacher needs to be the teacher. So how would it help mitigate that?
So teachers have a lot of freedom into what and how they teach. They have standards they have to follow, and there's so many different ways to present material or so many different materials to present. There's an unlimited number of publishers out there that are vying for our attention. And one of the things I do is I receive all of the emails that go out, all of the phone calls from all of the companies. And I wade through so many of the presentations that they have about, oh, here's this product that you need to buy. And so I look at it, I think about the needs of the students and the teachers, and I present it to the teachers. And so our teachers are involved in the decision-making process, of which, not always, but as many times as we can, we let the teachers have some control over what and how they're teaching.
Yeah.
So I help organize the meetings with the teachers and to help get them the products they need to most efficiently do their jobs.
Got it. Okay. And within that, so now kind of getting into just the meat of this, these standards that it's kind of your bread and butter to help with. First off, is this from a government? Is this from NCEA? Who is this from? Is this from Pope Leo?
Right, good question. So the Florida Catholic Conference is the accreditation bureau, I guess, is the word for the Catholic schools in the state of Florida.
Okay.
And that comes from back in the 60s. It was a conference of all the bishops. And so over time, the importance of that accreditation entity is that we have a set of standards and benchmarks for excellence and for self-improvement. So, as a teacher, I always went into every year, how can I do this better? And as a school, it's the same thing. So it's an ongoing review of the standards and benchmarks, and then an outside group come in, and by outside group, I mean teachers or administrators from other schools and dioceses around the state. So when I say we're having our 6-year review, we will have self-studied. We will have looked and rated ourselves according to a rubric for each standard and benchmark. And then after we've completed our report, an outside group of people will come in and look to see if they agree with what we see about ourselves.
Okay.
And when you think about when you went to USF, you said,
yes,
you might not have picked a non-accredited university knowing that your credits may not transfer if you wanted to go to another. So there's a lot of legalities involved in accreditation.
Sure.
So if we want our families to get financial aid, like the Step Up program, which is important right now in education, we have to stay accredited.
Sure.
If we want, we have all state certified teachers, so we're a higher level of professionalism than maybe an entity that's not accredited.
Got it. So is that true for every state? Every state has their own board, or are there some other national options? Because I know there's is the NSBEC standard the same as this? Is that like a different thing?
I think it's related. This was I found this out recently because somebody was talking about there's different kinds of schools, like Waldorf schools and independent schools. So independent schools have their own accreditation group. Every different type of school has their own set of standards and benchmarks that they follow.
Okay. So for St. Lawrence specifically, you're given these standards, I suppose, and then what does this look like now? Like per grade, how does this work? You mentioned people will come in. Are they judging based off of the materials used, the teacher themselves, the student test scores?
Not necessarily. So how do they do that? So there are several different categories of areas. There's leadership and governance. There's Catholic identity. The other two are, I can't remember at the moment. We get together as a school community and we make committees, and our committees look over small sections of the standards and benchmarks, and then we look for evidence we just brainstorm of what types of things have we done, what things have we published, what activities have we pulled together in the last year that show evidence of excellence in each of these areas. And if there's something that we can't find any evidence on, that sort of helps develop our goal setting for the next set of years before we have another visit come.
So there's these committees are kind of per subject, and I guess the underlying importance of what we want to talk about today too is how the faith is incorporated in each subject. You mentioned that that's part of each standard or basis of your accreditation. So I guess we can just take it subject by subject. I'll let you start wherever you want to start here of how do teachers incorporate the faith into other subjects.
Right. So a couple of the really big important standards are that our Catholic culture is visible. You should be able to walk into any Catholic school and see evidence of the faith through the crucifix, through the we just put up brand new pictures of the Pope.
Yes, yeah, it's official.
We have our bishop pictured front and center in there. You'll see bulletin boards that relate to activities the students are doing that are faith-based. The list goes on and on, but it shouldn't be a mystery in any given classroom that you're in a Catholic school.
Sure.
And further, students should experience religion or Catholic identity in all classes and subjects. So it's not just religion class where they're learning about their faith, it's in all the classes. And when I have gone out to visit other schools for their accreditation, these are wonderful, faith-based, loving Catholic schools. We often will walk in to visit classrooms and we'll see a prayer at the beginning of class, but the content isn't always connected to their faith during the lesson. Their lesson plans will include a faith connection oftentimes, but teachers are so busy. Every minute counts. They're thinking about their content. They're thinking about little Susie and little Johnny and all of their individual needs that they have, that sometimes the faith connection is not as evident as it should be. And when we're going out to visit, we may only have 10 or 15 minutes in a classroom. So my thought today was I could share some ideas of what I've seen in some exceptional classrooms as to how we can have an easier way to make sure that that part is not forgotten.
That'd be stellar. Yeah, I love these. Something that I'm like just I think is very helpful is physical, tangible recommendations, advice,
tips and tricks
from a perspective that actually knows what's going on, what to do for these things.
Right. Most teachers will start their class and end their class with prayer. It's pretty much a given across the board. But I've seen some really interesting things happening in classes where the teachers will automate that faith connection so that the kids take a little bit of control of it. Such as there are teachers who have classroom jobs. And one of the classroom jobs is a faith connection. And they will have a student whose job is at any given point in the lesson, could be the beginning, middle, or end, to raise their hand and say, I know how we can connect this to our faith. And they're thinking about gospel messages that they've heard from their priest, or they're thinking about a prayer verse that they've read.
That's really fun. I like that a lot. Okay, so it's an ownership part of it, of tell us. Now, practically, as a teacher, how would you manage that for students who might not know as much about the faith or maybe aren't Catholic? How would you manage that?
Yeah, that's the best way to learn is to teach. So they buddy up. If we have brand new student to our school that we know has been in a different setting previously, buddy them up with someone.
Heather Womersley's first bit of advice is assigning a student to help integrate the faith. Do you have any specific examples of like a fun story of a kid doing this in a class that you saw?
Faith ambassadors. Yeah, they love it when you give them a title too. They just love that. So we have some students who, I was in a 5th grade class. It was a brand new teacher. And she was trying really hard to make sure she hit everything that was going to be on the observation form, and the faith connection was really important to her. So in addition to having a set of math-related scripture verses in the front of every student's notebook so they could refer back to that throughout, there was also a student who was in charge of noticing number patterns as it relates to the Bible. So in the Bible, I bet you can think of different number patterns. And that's a big one that we see in a lot of math classrooms, is having a student say, hey, this reminds me of whichever, a psalm number or a scripture verse number.
Okay, so to take this subject by subject too, like math, numbers, patterns, that sort of thing. English class, you're doing a passage that isn't faith-based.
Right.
How would you tie that in?
Well, first of all, with English, and also include your reading in that language arts, that can be a real easy one if the teacher can create a thinking question about how did this character respond in a way that was Christ-like. In one fourth grade classroom I visited, they had character traits on the wall. And one of their anchor charts was Christ, character traits of Jesus. And so they had kind and respectful and welcoming and all of the words that you associate with Jesus. And so they would compare their characters that they're reading about in almost any story. So that was very, very simple, and that's a common thread that they can do throughout their language program. In grammar, they can just make up a sentence that has something to do with their faith.
Sure.
Let's diagram this sentence about, Another one is instead of purchasing a typical handwriting book, we ordered Writing Our Catholic Faith. So our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders are learning cursive. I know people out there think, why are we doing cursive? We don't test it. In Catholic schools, we don't have to test it to teach it. It's important in their brain development. And so we definitely still teach cursive writing. Yeah. But instead of just getting a generic one, we found one that was related to the faith. So the kids are practicing their cursive letters using prayer verses. Okay. And using stories from the Bible.
Okay, so there's that. Now, science class. What's going on? What's going on here?
Sure.
How do we do this?
My second grade teacher did a lesson recently and invited me in where she was talking about God's creation, and it was about birds and their different features that help them to stay safe in storms. And so then we were able to, connect that to their first communion and their reconciliation. They're the sacrament year in second grade. So everything they do, every story they have in class, they talk about their faith and how God created that and the respect for living things. And then she took the class outside to look in the trees and draw the pictures. And they just do a lovely job on those sacrament years of connecting everything easily. But God made this. We have a STREAM teacher at St. Lawrence. Okay. Science, technology, religion, engineering, art, music, math. I can't remember which ones. But it incorporates everything, and it usually includes some kind of engineering and design. And the teacher that we have teaching that is incredible about no matter what the topic is, if it's catapults or if it, whatever her topic is, she's relating it to something in the Bible, some kind of Bible story. She'll begin, stop in the middle, and at the end refer back to whatever her religious inspiration is. And that is really lovely. I have a friend in another diocese who told me about a project that she does with her middle school students on that same line. Is in their STREAM class, they'll do a challenge where they have to work in groups. Sometimes she'll do this in multi-grade groups. So the kids come together to kind of bridge the gap between grade levels, because oftentimes our grade levels are kept separate, but she wanted to bring them together. And so she challenged them to make a bridge out of either popsicle sticks and tape, or to make it a little more challenging, spaghetti noodles. Oh, wow. A given number of toothpicks and a very small amount of masking tape. So they have to work together. And it has to be strong enough, their creation has to be strong enough to hold a penny in the middle without breaking. Okay. And so as a culminating activity with that is they have to look up a prayer scripture related to cooperation, friendship, or just bridging something to come together in community. Okay. So I just love that. And then they're in other science classes, they can bring in ethical discussions about, looking at whatever their topic of study is through a religious lens. How does this work with or against our faith and what we're learning? So
a lot of this makes sense to me if you're a teacher, you're into your faith, you want to incorporate it into your classroom. There's also, you mentioned this too, like there are some teachers who just aren't Catholic or just maybe aren't well catechized. What would be the remedy for that as a principal and like as an educator, maybe to your fellow educators? Like how would that happen?
Right. The principal, the administrative staff has to kind of lead the way in that, especially for our non-Catholic teachers. And periodically we do have those, and we have some wonderful folks in our schools as a result of that kind of recruitment of teachers outside the faith, and sometimes we're able to convert them over to Catholicism. Not always, but sometimes.
Yeah.
It's just to look out for those faith connections. They need to see it around them. And so something that we did one year was I created a bulletin board in the main office of different faith connections that we found throughout the year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so we would print off pictures from our Facebook page whenever our students were out in the world, such as we had some students that were, let's see, Happy Feast Day to St. Lawrence, the patron of our school, the great martyr of the faith. You know, different, when our priests would come into the school and different presentations that they would make. We recently had a physician, I think he was a parent, come in with our priest to do a talk with our fourth graders about the anatomy of the eye. And that was related to, so we had the medical components of the eye through the lens of science and the greatness of God. So
Gotcha.
the physician talked about the medical anatomy of it, and the priest turned that around into more of a faith-based connection.
Yeah, so like having, I guess, outside people in the classroom
Right.
to help that tie
Right.
in.
I had a brand new teacher recently who came in and did an audition lesson. So sometimes when we are between
wow.
a couple
That's
of
fun.
great candidates, we'll invite them in to see how they relate with the students. And coming from public school, may not have known exactly how far to go with or what kind of faith connections because she hadn't had the experience with that. But she created an area and perimeter lesson in the math class. And instead of just measuring squares and rectangles, she added in a cross.
Oh, there we
So it
go.
was kind of an extra little added bonus for the students
okay.
to say, oh, wow, yes.
Yeah, it's just kind of a matter of, it sounds like a lot of this is just a mindset thing of how do I incorporate the faith? Because at least what you're saying too is it's a lot of stuff that's like, this isn't some crazy left field thing that you got to brainstorm for a year and a half. It's just, if you're actively engaged in incorporating the faith, these things kind of come up.
Right.
Is that what you've seen in
Absolutely.
in your time? Okay.
Yes. And sometimes, like I said, they get busy. But one of the best PD opportunities is just talking with the teacher down the hall.
Sure.
Take a walk through the school at any given time and listen.
Yeah.
And you'll hear it in every classroom. It's just the little things that they do. It's not only the prayers, but it's the referring back to a great homily that the priest said. We had our priest one time talk about, let's always be thinking about the next great thing we can do or the next good deed we can do for someone. And I hear that in the classrooms. I see them write it down on the board. So at any given time, they're in the middle of a lesson and say, how can we connect this to our faith? And just give it back to the kids.
Yeah.
And they'll come up with some amazing ideas.
So with this being such a natural thing of maybe the kids will come up with ideas, teacher will come up with ideas, organic thought, conversation, all this. It seems like maybe I'm off on this, but as a curriculum coordinator, your job is partially a very concrete, like here are some ideas, but also part of your job is just evangelization and spreading the gospel to your teachers in your school community. Because if your teacher is convicted about the gospel and convicted about sharing it with their class, then coming up with how they're going to incorporate it kind of seems like a secondary thing. Would you say it's a fair characterization?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a lot of resources available to them. One of them is a program called Curriculum Track, which is phasing out, and we're getting another one called Atlas. So these are curriculum software that allow the teachers to create their unit plans and lesson plans. And within the I guess you call it the portal or the program, it has drop-down menus so that for whatever your subject is, you can look, it just assists the teacher with finding scriptural references. So while it is second nature to most Catholic school educators, it's also something that can be specifically and intentionally crafted.
Sure. Yeah. It's still it's a tangible, real thing. So I guess also within this, can you speak to kind of the side of your job that I would imagine is that, like, if you're able to free up the more mundane things of a teacher's planning, then it leaves them free to do these higher order plannings of how to incorporate the faith. How does that work within your role?
Really just scheduling time for the teachers to work on that. That's the biggest commodity that I'm sure every teacher struggles with. If they just had a little more time, I could come up with a great
Yeah.
plan. But honestly, with the faith connections, it just sometimes is the Holy Spirit speaking to teachers,
Yeah.
like
Yeah, amen.
I'm just trying to think of how I can do this or that. And it just comes to you naturally, I think, through prayer. But honestly, it's just providing time and providing collaborative space for them. I've got a group of 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teachers who meet together for lunch every single day. We have it planned out so that they're able to do that. And our middle school has a time where they can have their meetings where they just talk about what's working in their classroom and what's not. Like I always try to say, it's the best PD is the teacher down the hall.
Yeah. Just spreading the natural growth of ideas.
Exactly. Each Catholic school has a mission, and part of the accreditation guidelines is that the mission statement has to be somewhat, it has to be very specific that you are a Catholic school.
Yeah.
So there were there have been schools that we have gone for visits, and we've recommended that they change it and just add in that we are a Catholic school community. And something that PE coaches do really well is integrating the mission into their lessons. So let's say they're getting ready to do pickleball or whatever sport they're going to do for the day. As they review the rules of the actual game, they can say, okay, what do we need to remember about our mission that is going to help us in being a good teammate today? So typically it's, something about excellence or becoming collaborative humans or helpful to others, something like that. So they're able to make that faith connection and relate it directly to the mission of the school, and then to have students reflect. So a big part of teacher formal observations is they get a higher level on the rubric, on the scoring rubric, if the students were able to reflect about how their activity today related to their faith.
Okay.
So sometimes it's just a matter of what did you see in others or what did you see in yourself that supports the mission of our school? It's really generic, but it applies to everything.
Yeah. It seems like a lot of this stuff is it's very practical, small switches that can reframe the context of what's going on.
Exactly.
I feel like one common thread that I've seen when talking to educators is kind of this tension between over spiritualization and like over practicalization, if that's a word. Like this balance between you need more time, you need planning, you need good ideas, you need like teachers pay teachers and groups and resources, but also you need a good spiritual life and prayer and a relationship with the Lord. In your time, in your role, all the schools you've seen, would you say in general the scale is tipping one way or another within Catholic schools, and kind of what's the remedy to get back to the golden middle of that?
It's a great question. At this time of year, when we've just wrapped up a school year, I don't know at what point people are going to see or hear this, but we've just wrapped up our school year, and it is 90 miles an hour. It's a time factor.
Yeah.
Everything is urgent. Everything is busy. That time to take quiet reflection is probably one of the hardest things to come by at certain times of the year, and particularly in the last 6 weeks of school.
Yeah.
And I think it's just, sometimes when we get together for a meeting, whether it's a small curriculum meeting or a grade level meeting or a big faculty meeting, just take a minute and pray and reflect and just listen for a minute is sometimes one of the most valuable things we can do.
Yeah.
But it is a very difficult tug of war between everything that has to be done. And if in my role, I'm able to take some time off of the plate by just, posting a bulletin board of great faith connections that I've seen, just so that as you're passing by with your class, oh, hey, that just caught my eye. Let me take a look. Maybe I can apply that to my class as well.
Yeah.
And just having those casual conversations at lunch with the other people around us, just to make planning that much easier.
Yeah. It does seem like this is that's a tension in everyone's lives even. It's just like, do I need to do this more? Or do I need to pray more? Do I need to whatever it is? And it sounds like what you're saying is just that it fluctuates, that it's kind of part of your job is to have this active pulse on your teachers of like, do they need more spiritual formation? Do they need more prayer time? Or do they need more resources? They need more help. They need more time scheduled for themselves.
Right.
And it just kind of changes throughout the year.
It does.
Now, I don't, like, to my knowledge, every school doesn't have a curriculum coordinator.
No.
At least explicitly, exactly. So if I'm a principal listening to this, or at least just an administrator, what advice would you have to help incorporate these key factors into a Catholic school without having the autonomy of having a curriculum coordinator who can post bulletin boards, who can do research, who can compile resources, who can come on podcasts and talk about these sorts of things?
Well, you're absolutely right about that. Not every school is able to have this position.
Yeah.
And I think the principal wears many, many hats. And if you're also lucky enough to have a campus minister, that person may be able to help in some way, just to be that common thread amongst all the teachers, to just remind them of what wonderful things are happening in the classroom. Or maybe just at the beginning of your faculty meeting, just to take a moment before you start getting into the business of your meeting, however often you have them, once a month, once a week, whatever it may be, is to just, have a quick sharing time about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because and even within that, I guess I'm still quite not there in understanding how, as an administrator, you would get buy-in to do all these things for non-Catholic teachers. Like, a lot of this makes sense and sounds great if you're already working with a group of faculty who is deeply into their faith. And I guess it's still not clicking of like, how, as an administrator, do you get buy-in from teachers who aren't fully bought in to the Catholic part of the Catholic education?
Part of that is accountability of the actual teacher being hired and knowing that this is an expectation that has to be met in the classrooms. It's a non-negotiable, I think, in our schools. And that can be an area of professional development for a teacher that's not so keen on stretching. But I think most of our teachers that choose to work in Catholic schools are willing to make that stretch and to make that effort. And again, just seeing it in action around them and other teachers, will often put space as an issue. I think when we have the opportunity to have good enrollment numbers, we lose space for offices.
Yeah.
I was visiting a school recently in the Diocese of Orlando, and they had a teacher that set up shop in the middle of the middle school hallway, and I think she was dean of students, and so she had a bench or a stool that was right there. So as the kids are walking down to take their bathroom break, they'll stop and chat with her for a minute. So she's got her pulse on what's going on in the school, but we're losing space. And so some of us have had shared office situations where you're putting multiple teachers together in the same room for desk space purposes. And so they're just, the more they hear from each other, and I've heard that towards the end of this school year, there was a teacher retiring and made mention that every teacher that teaches in his classroom space, because we're all sharing space, he's learning, even as someone that's been teaching for 30 years, still learning from his coworkers and then adapting. And I think it's just a matter of being able to have that time to get into each other's classrooms. Every time I go and do a formal observation, I would love to take 2 other teachers with me so they can see, because I get so much out of it. I get so many great ideas, tips and tricks, and things I see on their boards. And just learning from each other, I think, is one of the best things. But for that principal that doesn't have that much time, just add it into the conversation as often as possible.
Yeah, and it sounds like this. I really like this big silver lining of, if your teachers are working closer together physically, it's a bed of coal. If you're getting these coals closer together, they're going to get hotter and hotter. So it seems like there's a deep marriage between a pulse on the school and a pulse on your faith. How do you manage getting a pulse on the school, on the students? What do you do to do that?
It's just being present. with the kids, walking through the classrooms. I try a couple times a week, as much as possible, to walk through and visit every single classroom.
Yeah.
And visit the teachers, and I just ask them, is there anything you need? And they'll tell me. And if they don't tell me directly, somebody else will tell me.
Yeah. The students are so funny, honest.
They are.
It's awesome. I love everything about it. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, it's great. They are the best. We have so many wonderful little blessings of personalities. A little student who was, loved making things and came around sometime during Lent to show me the crown of thorns that he made to help with the Stations of the Cross. He was just so proud to show me that. Came and showed me a different iteration of it every day for a week. But you're right, they do. The kids will. When there are problems, there's always someone that will speak up on behalf of a group, whether it's a student group or a teacher group. And so it's important for us to collaborate and to listen. We just have to listen to each other and help support wherever we can.
Yeah. And I mean, even in our time speaking now, you seem like someone who you put forth a very joyful presence. You're happy to listen and talk to people. And that plays a big role in getting feedback and community building, and getting a pulse is actually giving people attention and joy and time when they come to you,
right,
to tell you these things.
Right. There's a lot of tension that is involved in taking care of a school staff.
Yeah.
But from the teacher point of view, some of our middle school teachers have, an entire grade level of kids. So that's 60 people and 60 sets of parents.
Yeah.
And there's just so many things that everyone's juggling. So to give them the space to be able to come and share their concerns. And sometimes they just need to share it. Sometimes they want advice and feedback.
Yeah.
And it's not always my place to give a solution. Sometimes it's just an ear.
Yeah. And that's always again, it's about getting a pulse, right? It's not always about fixing whatever's going on.
Right.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense.
And I take notes. I listen to parents. I listen to teachers. I listen to students. I keep track of the things that are common threads of problems. And I want to be, in my role, an advocate to go to the right people that can make positive changes so that next week or next month or next school year can be better for everybody.
Do you have any particular curriculum institutions that you've made that have come from that?
Not always curriculum-wise, but often procedurally.
Okay.
Sometimes we need more supervision in a certain area or another. Sometimes in the processes of how, certain things are approached, such as aligning a certain grade level's plans for how they handle, let's say, independent reading. It's just all of the different things that come around. Curriculum-wise,
it doesn't have to be curriculum
Yeah.
either. I was just curious if there's any specific institutions that you were like, yeah, I heard this and then I did this.
Oh, yes.
And then it resulted in this. I'm just
Sure.
curious what some of those anecdotes would be.
Well, one in particular, a couple of years ago, the process for, we have lunch and recess all in one class period of about 43 minutes, 30-something minutes at certain schedule days. And to have all of our middle school kids, or even all of our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade kids out on the field at one time just seemed a little problematic. So the next year we instituted having, when we had middle school out together, 6th grade went out to play first, while 7th and 8th was inside having lunch, and then they would switch. So it allowed the 6th graders to be their own little entity on the field.
Yeah.
So they weren't commingling with the 7th and 8th graders. And the same thing with our 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Our 5th graders had a separate time. And that reduced the number of students we had to supervise playing all at the same time, and it enabled us to give more attention to the ones that were there. And it was a really good change for that procedure. That's just one example.
Yeah. No, but I think that gives a lot of insight into just the sort of things that it's very funny as a non-educator that, like, it has never even crossed my mind that somewhere there was a human with expertise and a thought process about who's going to go to recess when. It was just like, it was just like, it's a given thing. It's
Right.
never even, I've never conceived of the fact that somewhere there's a lovely lady with years of education experience who's thinking about, well, wait, when should I send out this group so they can have this time and do this?
Exactly. Everything has to be planned
Yeah.
and organized, and make sure you have the appropriate coverage so we keep kids safe and happy.
Wow. Did you want to get into this fourth grade project at some point?
Yes, I kept a little note.
Is this like an all-time favorite thing of yours?
No, just kind of when I was keeping track of various things that were happening around the school, this was one that caught my attention. The fourth grade did a project on renewable resources. They researched. So it was solar, wind, or water. And one of the items that was required is, how can renewable resources be considered a gift from God?
Huh.
So the teachers are intentionally planning that faith connection in every unit and every lesson. I've been in the same fourth grade class where they have 4 or 5 thinking questions after a reading passage, and one of them is always very specific about the faith. So intentionality in creating those faith connections goes a long way to making sure it's not forgotten in the hustle and bustle.
Yeah, and it's, man, the pace is just crazy.
It is.
It is wild. We're getting towards the end of our time. I'm curious if there is like 1 or 2 things that in your whole time as an educator you have seen that's like your city on a hill thing, or like just something that has been incorporated, a lesson you've learned. Like, what is like, is there just something that you're like, that was the best thing I've ever seen in Catholic education?
Oh my goodness. Give me a minute.
If there's not, that's totally fine as well. I'm just really curious if there's something like that.
Best thing I've seen.
You can just take some time and think about it. We can edit out.
You know, the very best thing in Catholic education are the wonderful people that each school's principals and admin team have put into place. It's those teachers that are forming relationships with students and families. And in Catholic schools, we have the ability, you know, for me personally, I taught at Holy Family in St. Pete for all of the years that my children were attending my same school. So my children's friends and families were our friends and families. And you have those people forever. My daughter started when she was 4 years old and has all the same friends, and in her 20s the same little group of girls from kindergarten are still together. So it's the relationships that we are able to form. It's something very different and very special in this Catholic school setting.
I think that's a beautiful place to wrap it up. I mean, I can't think of anything more of an exclamation point on faith incorporation, accreditation, anything that could trump a true relationship.
Absolutely.
With a student to a teacher, to students to each other, teachers to each other, administrators to teachers, whatever permutation it is, it seems to me like that's kind of the beating heart of all of this.
Absolutely
So
is.
if you can get that going, then
You've
there.
got gold. I visited a school in the Diocese of Orlando recently, and every person we came in contact with, every teacher, every administrative, every assistant that came in to talk about the thing that we were visiting the school for, they were all so passionate about doing what was best for the students. And it was just a wonderful thing to see that it's not just in my school, it's in the school down the street. All of these schools just have these beautiful family, I think we call it La Familia at St. Lawrence, but I think I think that permeates through every Catholic setting I've been in, and it's just those relationships are key.
Wow. Well, Heather, thank you so much for coming on and sitting
You're
down with
welcome.
me.
I
talking
love
about
it. Thank you for inviting me.
accreditation. Yes, it was wonderful. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. To end every podcast, we'll clap at the same time. So we are out.